I try to get him on the program all the time. He is so busy because he teaches a class in the middle of this program, exactly in the middle. So we can never get him in studio, but he is kind enough to be joining us on the phone. And John Danaher is on the phone right now. John, are you there?
Yes, it's nice to hear from you, Ariel.
It is a pleasure. Great to have you on. There's so much that we can discuss, and I know you just wrapped up a class, so thank you so much for doing this. Let's get right into it, John. Are you surprised that Georges St-Pierre is no longer the middleweight champion of the UFC?
In the sense that we all knew he had a medical issue going into this camp. No, because there was, by halfway through this camp, there was something very obviously wrong. And George was having serious medical problems 2 weeks into the camp, and they persisted throughout. They peaked between in a 6-week camp between week 4 and week 2 out from the main event. Things got so bad that literally we lost 2 weeks with 0 training. So the camp was really something of a disaster. It was only recovered in the last 2 weeks before the fight. So insofar as we all knew that, no, it doesn't really come as a surprise that the medical complications turned out to be pretty serious, and he was unable to defend the belt.
Wow. Did at any point you suggest for him to pull out of the fight? I mean, you lose 2 weeks, you're that sick. He's not in peak shape.
The big question there was, that was the obvious question. Should he pull out? There was a critical 3-day period when we had lost a week and a half of training, where the camp was in complete disarray, and all momentum for the camp had been lost. And I remember on a Friday night having a discussion for us, Sahabi, George, and myself, as to whether things were going to go forward from here, or we should just pull the plug. There was a big event. Madison Square Garden is one of the biggest venues for the modern UFC, and so to pull out that soon before would be politically, that would be a major decision. And it wouldn't look good for George's career. There were some vacillations before the fight happened. Would this happen? There were other people who wanted the fight, and for George to pull out just 2 weeks before would have been, politically disastrous. So we made a decision that if he didn't have a good workout on Monday, then George would have to pull out. He had a very good grappling workout on Monday, and then the next Tuesday he had his kickboxing or shootboxing workout, as he refers to it, kickboxing with takedowns, and that was okay. It wasn't great, but he was in the ballpark. And then he showed, I must say, a remarkable turnaround in technical performance leading up to the final days of the camp, and started to look like the old Georges St-Pierre, was literally less than a week to go before he had the first weight loss. The problem didn't go away. They're all at the actual day of the fight and beyond, obviously. But it wasn't as extreme as it was during a critical 2-week period right in the middle of the camp. And even the day of the fight, there was having major medical problems. Not as severe as I said, 2 weeks previously, but still pretty bad. And he's on medication now. Since the game was over, the initial tests were things like stomach cancer. I mean, that's how bad it was. And they all came back negative. But more comprehensive testing after the event showed it was ulcerative colitis. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. It's a very painful and debilitating condition with a wide array of symptoms which are often confused for other stomach ailments. One of the problems associated with stomach ailments is many of the symptoms are common to many different kinds of ailments, and it was finally diagnosed as ulcerative colitis, and we're working from there.
Wow. He had mentioned on my show that he threw up the day of the fight and that he wasn't feeling well, yes. But we never knew how extensive it was.
Severe. It's.
Were you worried?
The worst period. Yeah. And I'm not lying. Any comeback is always a difficult thing to manage. Any comeback in combat sports is difficult. If you look at the track record of great combat athletes coming back, there's been a few happy stories, but most of them are not good. And MMA is even harder because the actual sport is pretty young and there's tremendous technical progress. Years go by. It's been 4 years since George fought, and the sport itself has evolved a long way since then. Forget about individual fighters; the sport as a whole has evolved, and so to come back, 4 years in MMA is like 10-year layoff in boxing in terms of technical development. And if you look at, there's so many famous boxers who tried to come back. Muhammad Ali came off a 2.5 to 3 year hiatus where he wasn't even injured. He was fine. And had 2 warm-up fights, both of which were relatively mediocre, and then he lost his first title fight in Madison Square Garden, interestingly. So even someone as great as Muhammad Ali struggled with the idea of a comeback, which he did after 4 years with a fairly severe medical condition complicating things in a weight category that he wasn't used to. So it was a gamble. It was a calculated gamble, but it was a big gamble.
And do you think that this is directly a result of him adding this weight, the layoff, all that stuff? And in hindsight, if so, do you feel like bad methods were taken to do this? Like you guys should have done something differently to add the weight and to be a healthy middleweight?
I don't think it's appropriate for me to claim, it's a direct, I'm not a medical expert. That would be something for a doctor to answer. All I can offer is speculation. My answer is no, because it's not the first time George has had stomach issues. He had much less severe stomach issues in a previous camp. Also, the very nature of ulcerative colitis is it tends to be a problem which emerges over time. It's not something you eat a little bit more and suddenly you've got ulcerative colitis. It's something that builds up over time. So it's unlikely that it would have emerged as a result of increased caloric intake during a camp to try to middleweight. So with the proviso that I'm not a medical expert, and with that proviso in place, my speculation is that would be extremely unlikely.
Do you think if he never got sick, if he was okay throughout the entire camp, that he would have remained at 185? Because as you may know, there are some people who believe that he had no intention of defending that title if he won it. Actually, he entered the contract negotiations on the understanding that he would fight against Robert Whittaker. That was the understanding. A contract was signed in which it was clear that if he won, he would fight Robert Whittaker. So my understanding is no, he had the intention of fighting twice, at a minimum twice, at middleweight. In general, it's what many people don't understand about going upper weight divisions. They didn't understand that the majority of the problems you face is not the fight itself, it's the preparation for the fight. There's significant changes in diet. You're training with every single one of your training partners is now a weight division here. Most of the stress and toll on you is not the fight itself, it's the preparation for it. You're doing a 6 to 8 week camp with people who are 185 pounders, you're a 170 pounder, and if everything is you hit harder, you hit a takedown, you're moving a greater mix of body. The problems occur. It tends to be more of a training camp problem than a fight problem. There are certain advantages to being a smaller guy. You're faster. You see things quicker. There's some advantages to being a smaller, faster guy. We never really felt that George would have a strength problem with Michael Bisping. He's an extraordinarily strong welterweight, even though he's the biggest player there, in terms of just physical strength. We didn't see that being a problem. The problems are things, just physical mass, reach, things like these. These are the problems we looked at. And in camp, that definitely did take a toll. But George had every intention of having at least 2 fights at middleweight. Can I ask you, John, is it possible, I don't know, the connection keeps going in and out. Could we call you back, or is it possible to call you on a different line or something like that? Because I want to hear, I'm kind of hanging on every word.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll change my location upstairs. I'm currently in the basement of the Hinter Gracie Academy, so I'll just walk upstairs and see if that improves the hang on. There may be one problem. There's a boxing class going on. There may be the sound of heads in the background. Is that acceptable? That's
acceptable. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Is reception improving?
Let's try again. Can you ask me again that question?
Is your reception improving? I'm upstairs now.
Yeah, that's better. That's better. I think that's better. Okay, let's go with that. Are you okay with being in that position?
Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, great. So you believe that he, if he didn't get sick, he would have continued to fight. At this point, given what he's going through, do you think that it is more likely that he never fights again, given his health condition? Or do you expect him to come back at some point?
That is a definite possibility. I don't want to say yes or no because it's not my decision whether he comes back or these are deeply personal decisions that George has to make. Moreover, they have to be made not as spur of the moment decisions. These are life-changing decisions, so they'll have to be made in the on the basis of George's reaction to the medication he's taking for ulcerative colitis. From what I understand, the standard medications to ulcerative colitis take some considerable amount of time to take effect, anywhere from 3 to 8 months before you'll even notice significant changes. So we have to see how he reacts to his medication regimen and make a decision based on that.
Are you in favor of him not fighting again? In other words, would you prefer that he doesn't fight again at this point?
My thing is always with athletes, are you happy to do this? What I don't like to see is people fight because they feel they have to. This is a sport where it's a very, very hard sport. I don't think many people are aware of the rigors of what goes on in the championship level fight camp. It's not for the faint of heart. And if you're not 100% committed to the project and it's something which you positively enjoy doing, at least in some way, you may not enjoy every aspect of it, there has to be some kind of deep sense of enjoyment or fulfillment, then I don't believe you should get involved. I know one fight camp where George wasn't mentally committed to it was the fight camp with Hendricks, where there were doubts about whether he wanted to be fighting. He had thoughts about retirement prior to the fight. That was probably the fight camp where there was the least motivation to get in there in the gym as he normally would. Here, there was a tremendous motivation. George was extremely enthusiastic about the fight and expressed a deep desire to come back, but there was a physical problem which was making it difficult. So your first question was, medically, will he be able to come back? The answer is we don't know yet. We'll see how he reacts to medication. And your second question was psychologically, is he mentally in the game? Does he want to do this? And I know for a fact prior to the Bisping, that absolutely the answer was yes. But since this medical problem has come up and become so prevalent and emerged so strongly in the middle of the last camp, I guess it's an open question at this point. It'll be determined by how he reacts to the medication that he's on.
In all honesty, considering how he was feeling, are you surprised he beat Michael Bisping?
That's a great question, Ariel. I'm not going to lie to you. 2 weeks out before the fight, I had a talk with Faraz Sahabi, and I straightforwardly said to him, the Georges St-Pierre that I saw train today gets knocked out by Michael Bisping 9 times out of 10. That was
Wow.
2 weeks before the fight.
Wow.
And Faraz looked at me, and I looked at him, and we didn't say a word. We both knew it was true. It was a absolutely critical period. And I will say, George's ability to come back from that absolutely horrendous standstill of the fight camp and come back and look very, very strong the last week, and then go out on fight night and perform as he did. It's really something to watch. For me as a coach, it was one of the most inspirational things I've ever seen an athlete go through.
Wow. How nervous were you in the corner? Have you ever been that nervous before for a GSP fight?
To be honest, I never really get nervous in the corner because I have a task to perform. The only time I get nervous, any time I'm watching the fight, is if I'm not doing anything and I'm in the audience watching someone I like.
Okay.
But if it's someone I don't like, obviously I don't get nervous. If it's someone I'm not attached to or something like that. But if it's someone I like but I have a task to do, then nervousness never comes into it. You have a job and you're expected to do your job as a professional.
The reason I asked about nervous was just knowing what he had been through and the fact that you just said 2 weeks prior you thought that he was going to get knocked out 9 times out of 10.
I was greatly impressed by the degree of improvement in a week and a half. George went from looking like a second-rate fighter to something very close to the old Georges St-Pierre.
Wow. Were you in favor of him even coming back to begin with?
That's a great question, Ariel. When he first said, I want to come back, I had a very negative reaction to it. I was like, no, I don't think it's a good idea. You don't need the money. And I straightforwardly said to him, I just don't think this is a good idea. You've already done so much. And I had a heart-to-heart talk about why do you even want to do this? What's this about? And so my initial reaction was no, I didn't want him to come back. But he talked passionately about it. I could see that it was something he wanted to do, and it wasn't just some spur of the moment thing. That sometimes athletes just want to be back in the spotlight. A lot of times it's hard for an athlete just to leave the spotlight. And it wasn't that. He felt like he had something to do in the sport. So initially he was talking about, let's go back to 170 and Tyrone Woodley had become the champion. And I remember we watched the fight of Tyrone Woodley against Robbie Lawler together, and we were both greatly impressed by Woodley's performance that night. And he told me, let's get back in there. And I said something to him. I said, go back and fight at 170. You're just going to be doing the same thing you did for a decade. You're going to fight another top tier, very, very tough welterweight. And you've done that so many times. If you come back, you're just going to do the same old thing you did for a decade. Nothing's going to change. And I said, wait, if you come back, it's a huge thing to come back after 4 years. If you're going to come back, why don't you do something different? Something that's going to change your legacy. And we talked about it some more. And I said to him, listen, there's always been 3 criticisms of your career. The first is that you're so controlling and tactical in your approach to fighting that it makes for boring fights. That's always been a persistent criticism. The second is that you never fought upper weight class. You always fought guys at welterweight. And the third is you don't finish fights. Those are the 3 most persistent criticisms of the legacy of Georges St-Pierre. I said, why don't we do that? Why don't we focus on a training regimen that strongly emphasizes submissions and TKOs/KOs, punching powers, means of finishing a fight. You go up the weight division and you focus on the old dynamic in, out, and lateral movement of Georges St-Pierre to create a faster-paced fight that people find more interesting. So we ran the idea past other people, Faraz Zahabi, Freddie Roach, et cetera, and everyone said, you know what, that's a good idea. Let's go with that. The initial training that I saw George do in grappling, where George came in and worked with the squad and strongly emphasized submission holds. Normally, when I teach George Jiu-Jitsu, it's really what we call grapple boxing, which is the mix of striking and grappling on the ground. It's mostly positional work. Instead, we changed everything to submission holds favoring strangulations from the back and leg locks. And George made remarkable progress. He started working a lot with Freddie Roach on just the mechanics of punching, so that he was hitting harder. He was sitting on his punches better, and just working on the mechanical elements of just straightforwardly hitting harder, with a strong emphasis on left hook, jab, and straight rear hand. And these made significant changes. There was a noticeable sense in which he was definitely hitting harder, and he was working submissions with a lot of success in the gym. He started working with karate specialists who brought back the old linear in-out movement that George was so famous for in the early days of his career. And we were pretty confident before the camp started that people were going to see something new, something that would add to George's legacy. This wouldn't be George at 170 fighting another tough welterweight and doing the same thing he's done for a decade. This would be him fighting upper weight class with a strong emphasis on finishing the fight in a dynamic, mobile way that people found exciting. And I think the plan was brilliant. Unfortunately, the plan ran into a physical problem, which was completely unforeseen. But George, as the incredible athlete that he is, managed to find a way to get through that and enact the original plan, and he did exactly what the plan was designed to do. He finished the fight with his a beautifully applied strike into submission hold. He used both. He showed increased power. He knocked down a man who's extraordinarily difficult to knock down in a weight division above himself. He showed genuine improvements in punching power. He showed genuine improvements in submission attacks, finished beautifully on the back. And he did it on a man above him in weight class in a dynamic, exciting fight that went back and forth and thrilled a sold-out crowd at Madison Square Garden. So all three aspects, or all three of the main criticisms of his legacy, were answered in one fell swoop, so to speak. So it was a fantastic achievement on his part, made all the more remarkable by the fact that he had to go through so much physical adversity in order to get it done.
Incredible. Two last quick things for you. When do you expect to find out if you'll fight again?
I leave that entirely to George. Right now, he just came back from vacation. He obviously communicates a lot with his own management team. I don't think it's appropriate for me to give a date. I'll leave that up to George. He's the man in the set, and he should make that decision. That's really up to a combination of George, his doctors, and his management.
And were you surprised that he did it so quickly, or considering what he had been through, were you not surprised? Basically, like, he didn't try to wait it out or try to see if he'd feel better, that he just kind of said, "No, I'm not going to stick around here."
No, George has always had a deep affection and respect for other athletes in the UFC, and his feeling was, I could hold on to this and see how long I can ride this out, and then delay the fight with Mr. Whittaker. His feeling was, that's just not fair to the other athletes. He goes, I'm an established athlete. I have a legacy. I don't need the money right now. The other guys are working for their legacy, and they do need the money right now. The UFC is a business, and they can't just have some guy who, the UFC, in a sense, did George a favor. Like, they didn't have to give George the title shot. They could have given, there were three other people there that were very, very well qualified to take that title shot. And it would be, I think it would be reprehensible on anyone's part, George or anyone else, to get that shot and then delay a weight division based upon waiting for a result. You don't even know what the result is going to be. And it could be, as I said, anywhere up to 8 to 12 months. This is a long, long process.
Right.
You can't just hold a weight division for months at a time and expect other people to be happy about it. The UFC is a business. They have to run the business. They have to get things going. The athletes are the same. They're a brand unto themselves. And you can't just tell 5 people, you've got to wait for me and we'll see what happens. Like, maybe something will be good, maybe something will be bad. It's just unfair to say that to anybody. And George felt strongly about that it was unfair. So he said the best thing to do is to vacate the belt, and let's see where I stand 6 months from now, and work from there.
Well, okay, I lied. One more quick one. If he came up to you right now and said, "John, what do you think I should do? Have I done enough? Should I walk away at this point?" Would you tell him, "No mas"?
You're asking for my personal opinion?
Yes.
My personal opinion is that there's literally nothing more you can do in the fight. That would be my personal opinion, but that's what I said the last time too. But
right.
My initial feeling the first time to come back was, what more do you want to prove? Like, you've lived a life in the sport. You've done everything you want. You don't need money anymore. You have fame and wealth. You have a remarkable legacy. You're unquestionably one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time. And then George came out, did something even greater. His legacy was enhanced by the fight with Bisping in a remarkable way. And I'm just not sure what else he could do at this point. He says it's possible to go to 155 and win a third belt. If he did that, that would be incredible. But can George make 155? I don't know. As far as I know, he's never gone that low. He's not a particularly big welterweight. I know there are people fighting currently at 155 who are physically larger than he is. For example, I'm quite certain that Khabib Nurmagomedov is physically larger than George, walking around. He's a higher body weight. And he makes 155, but it's extremely difficult and rather unhealthy for him. And so Is it possible for George to make 155? Yeah, I believe medically it's possible. Is it healthy for him to do it? Especially given the stomach issues that he has, I don't know the answer to that. So my initial hunch is, for me, as my personal opinion, it would be the same as I had previously. You know, what really more do you want to prove? You've done everything there is. If he does have a deep and abiding passion and wants to come back and fight at either 185 or 170, and I feel the same kind of passion that I saw before the Bisping fight, I will back him 100% because I'm not just a coach to the that's why I'm also a friend. I would never just leave a friend and say no. But my initial hunch would be, you've done so much. Like, why are you doing this again? Especially if you have any kind of doubts about your health.
Right.
So we'll see.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. I can't thank you enough, John, for the insight, the honesty, the transparency. Really appreciate you coming on today. I know you're very busy, so thank you so much for this. Absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Ariel. Yeah, pleasure talking to you as always.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. There he is, the great John Danaher, one of the very best at what he does, one of the very best BJJ coaches in the entire world, checking in, and that's mind-blowing stuff. If you had any doubts, and look, I know people could say, oh, he's just protecting his guy, he's his coach. If you had any doubts as to how he was feeling, I mean, we found out even more about how he was feeling, and it sounds horrific. But if you had doubts about his intentions, about the decision to walk away, you got to give him props at the very least for this. He didn't have, like, it's not like he had to come back for February or March, right? He just said, look, I know I'm not coming back. There's nothing that will convince me to come back at 185 after what I've been through. I'm out of here. Take the belt. Have your fight with Whitaker and Rockhold in Perth, and I'm not going to stand in the way. And in fact, I was told that he actually, through other sources, reached out to Rockhold to give him the heads up that he was going to be doing this before it was made public, just giving him that heads up. So I think it says a lot about GSP, and quite honestly, I didn't even know that it was that bad, his health issues, and hopefully he gets better very soon. I think he's been trying to downplay it a little bit, but did not. 2 weeks before the fight, he thought he'd get knocked out 9 times out of 10. That's insane for a coach to say.